All right, folks, ain't nothing to it but to do it. Welcome back to The Count, where we're counting down the major stories of the week. Still Carl Higbee. We're wrapping up our countdown with story numero uno. My body, my choice. At least that's what the Democrats usually say. As COVID crackdowns heat up through the country, President Biden and some of the largest U.S. companies are implementing coronavirus Trump vaccine mandates. We're taking the rights of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. Distinguished university professor at Touro College and the author of Saving Freedom from Itself, Thane Rosenbaum. Welcome to the show, Thane. I gotta say, this is something for me that is really questionable. Can they actually legally mandate this in private companies?
Private companies is different from the federal government, Carl. For instance, a private company takes the position like a restaurant: no shoes, no shirts, no service, right? They can take that position, and they have the right to do it as a business. With respect to their employees, it's the same situation of Colin Kaepernick, right? Colin Kaepernick did not have a First Amendment right to take a knee because he was on the job, and in theory, even though the vaccines don't have FDA approval and only have emergency use authorization, which means that the employer has to give you informed consent saying you can take it or you could not take it. We give you, it's up to you, it's your choice. But they could say, Carl, it's a qualification of the job. It's like having a bachelor's of arts in science or computer science. It's to say we don't hire you unless you have your vaccination because it's now a qualification of the job.
Right. Well, that comes down to an employment agreement, though. Could, in fact, if you had an employment agreement, like let's say you person A at company X, that is 3 years, during that 3-year term, can they change those terms and then fire you?
It depends on what's in the contract about when it comes to issues like this, right? They would deem this to be emergency circumstances where we have some provision that refers to things that we may require. Again, I'll go back to the Colin Kaepernick. There are teams that say you have to wear a suit on the bus or on the plane, right, before games and after games. Mm-hmm. So it could be, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the contract. But again, I think the better argument is that there's no FDA approval, right? Mm-hmm. And to say, if in fact you have to give me informed consent, there's a reason for that, right, Carl? Right. The reason is it's not approved. Right. So how can you force me to take this? But, Carl, there's just no legal precedent here, nothing. Right. And this is, we're going to see stuff, I can assure you. The Supreme Court ruled over 100 years ago that states can mandate smallpox vaccination. That's it. That's all that they said. And that's not the federal government. That's the state. The Supreme Court has always taken the position vaccinations are the jobs of local governmans, not the federal government. And they were
very pointed about the decision. It was not a broad decision. I'm very familiar with that. So, Michael Blickman, he's a management attorney for an employment attorney firm with Eisen Miller LLP. He said in a Bloomberg article, it would be a stupendously bad idea to go down the road for an employee relations perspective. Now, that said, this comes into separating people. They're going to say, well, vaccinated are on floor 1, unvaccinated are on floor 2. My question is let's say you run out of coffee on floor 2. Did they have a lawsuit right away that, well, they're not giving enough coffee to the unvaccinated people?
Look, the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, Carl, never raised issues about vaccinations, right? So you can't make a distinction between people of color and nationality and race and ethnicity, right? For instance, and religious, there's religious exemptions under Title VII. If you have a sincerely religious held belief, you could essentially say, my religion prevents me from taking the vaccination. So there's always a Title VII argument. But I'm not sure that will work because, again, the issue of public health and emergency circumstances, that's what states will always argue. Yes, you have a religious belief, but it can't supersede the rights of everyone to be safe from COVID-19. Again, Carl, there's no real case law on this. And I guarantee you what we're seeing now with Disney and Walmart, we're going to see some cases coming out of that, because there are going to be some employees that are going to say just what you said.
Right.
I've been working here for 20 years. I'm one of your best employees. Now you're telling me I'm not qualified?
Right.
I'm not qualified? Why?
Yeah,
I'm one of
exactly.
your best employees.
Right. Well, so Thane, President Biden had announced a vaccination requirement across federal government. Now take a listen to this.
Every federal government employee will be asked to attest to their vaccination status. Anyone who does not attest or is not vaccinated will be required to mask no matter where they work, test 1 or 2 times a week to see if they've acquired COVID.
Whoa. Okay, so first off, HIPAA comes to mind. Second off, when I was a presidential appointee, I tried to fire people who were just really bad at their jobs. I mean, these guys were they were terrible at their jobs. I went through 6 months of paperwork,
I bet.
and then finally was able to get a disciplinary review board after 6 months. But yet you're going to hold these people to the ground and vaccinate them, or you're going to make them put on a mask, or you're going to make them test. I mean, where does it cross the line of HIPAA here?
Well, Carl, that goes back to my original point. The federal government has never been in the business of mandating vaccines. They've mandated quarantines, but never vaccines. Mm-hmm. So this itself is unprecedented. So that's the first question. The second question, remember what I said about Colin Kaepernick, right? Now you're dealing with the government. You're not dealing with a private enterprise like the San Francisco 49ers.
Right.
Now the question is, do I have a constitutional right to my body, just like a woman has a constitutional right to her body for reproductive freedom? Do I have a right to not take medication that I think is harmful to me because it doesn't have FDA approval?
Well, not even
do
that.
I have, quote, right.
Just, do you have it or not? Period. It doesn't matter if it's good, bad, perfect, imperfect, whatever. Is it your body?
It's never been tested, Carl. Right? You're making a very similar argument to women that have been in favor of abortion. You're saying, under the Constitution, I have a right to privacy. Yeah. And my right to privacy can be asserted in this way, too. Again, we've seen right to privacy with abortion and contraception and same-sex marriage and homosexual relations. We've never seen it here. I promise you, Carl, if this goes forward, I'm going to be back on your show and we're going to remind you that this was the right to privacy we were talking about.
We're literally writing the book on it as it is right now. Thane Rosenbaum, thank you for joining us.
Anytime, Carl.
Yeah, folks, we are going to see this fought all the way to the Supreme Court, like he said. I'm very interested to see where it goes, but you know what? My body, my choice. I choose to keep myself a very healthy individual. I should have the right to see what goes inside of it or not. And it should be a personal decision with your doctor. What's best for you? That's all we have for this week's episode of The Count. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next Saturday, 5 p.m. Catch the top 10 stories of the week. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night. I'm Carl Higbie.